I'm Katie, and this is Within, a podcast empowering women to reimagine the unrealistic standards that have kept us from living in our truest nature. Here, we'll unravel the programming that's taught us things like perfectionism, shame, and overwhelm to settle into our deepest knowing and our truest selves. My hope is that these stories and conversations ignite tiny glimmers of resonance and awareness to remember the woman and the life you're so deeply aching for already exists within you. I'm Katie. This is Within, and let's get into it. Okay, I've got a really special guest for you today. We have on a woman that I've been following and admiring for years. She's one of those people that I have in my life that is sort of a role model, the way she lives her life, the way she takes care of her well-being, and also just like what she's created for herself. We have on the show Andrea Nakayama, who is an internationally known functional medicine nutritionist, educator, and speaker who's leading a movement to transform the health industry into a system that works, empowering patients and practitioners alike with the systems and tools of functional nutrition. Andrea is the founder and CEO of Functional Nutrition Alliance, who, if you are not familiar with, they have trained over 7,000, I think it is now, nutrition practitioners all over the world. Andrea really challenges us not to get prescriptive and to get too much in the weeds when it comes to our well-being or nutrition or medicine, but really to take a step back and asks us to listen close and ask the question, what moves you? I know it sounds so simple, like how is that going to help us feel better? But her philosophy and what medicine has shown us is that by simply stepping back and asking those simple questions of like, what moves me, and turning within, that usually the answers to our wellness are right in front of us and are simpler than we first imagined. We talk on the show about narrative medicine, what that is, and how she combines functional nutrition with narrative medicine. And we talk about longevity and aging and sort of rewriting the narrative around longevity. She's really focused her work on women and what she's calling the fourth chapter of life. And I really love the way she looks at it. I find her view in wellness and well-being really inspiring. It's something that I can relate to and just feels really good for me. So I am really excited for you to take a listen. I know you're going to get a lot out of this show. So let's dig in. Well, Andrea, I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
What I love so much about what you do and what I've talked so much about on this particular platform is, current wellness culture can get really prescriptive.
Totally.
And it can get really individualized and be really like, give us a list of things to go do. And it can kind of almost feel like shameful, like it's the woman's fault she's not feeling well.
Yes.
And what I love about what you do is you kind of flip that script and you invite women to say like, yes, there's all these things that we could do. And there's a whole host of tools out there. But first, let's turn it within and create a foundation of well-being within ourselves. And you really empower women to find the well-being within them, which is what I love so much. So personally, that's why I'm just so happy to have you on the show. With that being said, I'd love to just jump right in. And if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your story, how you first, maybe the first experience of like when you turned within and sort of realized, and I'm guessing it's probably around with like your late husband's passing.
Yeah.
And finding your own voice and your own calling and your own purpose. So if you don't mind, can we kind of start there, take it back a little bit?
Yeah, what a journey. And I just have to say, in reflection to what you're talking about with wellness, and you wrote a great article on wellness and what happens. It is an industry. It is commodifying our health.
Yes.
And I think it's an act of resistance when we recognize that quote unquote wellness is selling something to us, and going within, as you encourage us to do or help us to see, allows us to tune out the noise so we can tune into what matters most. So wanted to acknowledge that in your work as well. And, I can bring a clinical and physiological perspective to that through my experience. And I will say that my journey into health happened and started for myself before my late husband was diagnosed. And that was back in April of 2000 that he was diagnosed with a very aggressive brain tumor. Prior to that, I think I was dealing with what were the early signs of my autoimmune condition, Hashimoto's, but I didn't have a name for it. So I was trying to quote unquote control what was going on in my body and what I was feeling. At the same time, when we started to try to get pregnant, it didn't happen as quickly as I thought it would. And so I was encountering these things where my own body was defying me and everything I knew to be true, which I think we all go through at various stages, most especially as we enter perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. I always say that when we're looking at health and wellness, it works for 80%, and I speak to the 20%. But as we enter menopause, that 80-20 flips, because we are no longer going to just respond to what's happening. So my late husband Isamu's diagnosis kind of catapulted me out of me just doing experiments on myself with food and how I ate and how I moved into the medical system of health. And that helped me to see a lot of the gaps in our medical system of care. And I say that not to disparage our medical system.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does certain things. It does not do decidedly other things where we can and have the opportunity to listen in and fill the gaps for ourselves. So going back in time, that was a big wake up call for me. I did not work in the industry. I was not a health professional. That happened after he passed away 2.5 years later when I was a single mom. I was pregnant when he was diagnosed. So lots of change kind of woke me up to what else do we look at? Where
Yeah.
else do we focus our attention? And then, Katie, when you asked the question about going within, I think my life as a single mother and a widow and a business builder and owner almost forced me to look within. If I wasn't
Yeah.
happy with something, there was nobody to blame.
Yeah. I could see that.
It's the mirror. And so I feel like I have a skill set that is kind of the blessing of all the trauma I experienced, which is, wait a minute, what's that sensation? What's that urge? What's that desire? Slow down, tune in.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. It's incredible to think that your journey into, I guess, like mindful well-being, if you will, and turning within was started 20 some years ago. Before that was really even a thing. We weren't really talking about this then. Can you talk a little bit about, your late husband, him getting diagnosed with his terminal cancer? It was brain cancer,
Yes.
correct? Am I correct in
Yes.
saying that?
Yeah.
How that affected you, and was that really the catapult into nutrition for you? I mean, I know you were taking care of it for yourself, but was that really the thing then that catapulted wanting to go back to school and pursue this further? Can you talk about like when and how that was ignited within you?
Yes. Yeah. So when he was diagnosed, I was 7 weeks pregnant and I
Mm,
already was really into food. So I loved to cook. We had these elaborate dinner parties with
yeah.
friends. I was really into the making of food. We lived in the Bay Area at the time. And what I realized was that he was given a death sentence, 6 months to live. I was 7 weeks pregnant, and that we had to kick into high gear and do everything and anything. Ultimately, it was his choice. He was the one at the medical library researching which trials, because he was getting courted, basically. He was a young man with this kind of cancer, a glioblastoma, before it was a young person's condition. Mostly older people were diagnosed with it. That's not true anymore, unfortunately. But at
Okay.
that time, there weren't a lot of young men. He was early 30s. He was 31 when he was diagnosed with this condition. And so everybody who had a protocol that was in trial was contacting him because, of course, he was going to have better outcomes than an 80-year-old man.
Yeah.
So he was researching, deciding what to do there. And I felt like I needed to do something to make a difference. What could I do while taking care of my own body? So I think of that time as my boot camp. Like you're saying, not only was there not a lot of mindfulness, there was not a lot of online.
Right,
There was
right.
not a lot of nutrition. I was reading Andrew Weil and Michael Lerner. Like,
Yeah.
there was not a lot to dive into. But I started making connections between like metabolism and cancer growth, the
Yeah.
gut brain connection, how sugar feeds growing cells, which are cancer cells. And I would bring that information to Isamu and say, here's what I'm learning. What do you want to do? And he would be like, sugar out. And
Okay.
I took that and then thought, well, he has a real sweet tooth. How do I, make sure we're not depriving
Yeah.
ourselves while
Yeah.
also not feeding the cancer? So we could go just cold turkey or we could have fun. And so
Yeah.
that's what kind of led me into what are the lower glycemic? How do I explore? And things have taken off in so many different directions since then, positive and negative, I will say. And that was the beginning for me that made me really dive more into nutrition and lifestyle. He really embraced lifestyle. He was meditating and doing qigong and getting massages and going to yoga. Like
Wow. Okay.
he
Okay.
he became like Buddha like,
Well, Andrea, was that in your world before him? Was that in your nature as well before him, or was he really an influence on you with that?
I was going to yoga and I danced and, but I don't think like we were into any mindfulness. I don't think it was how we thought about things. We
Yeah.
weren't, spiritually or religiously oriented in any way. And it just became a very deep grounding in living with meaning without even having to label it. I mean, he carried around the Bhagavad Gita and Beowulf. Like it just became his way of, I think, facing his own mortality and
Yeah.
reading the mythology and thinking into what does this mean. But it just became our life. Like 2.5 years. He was given 6 months to live. We had almost 2.5 years.
Oh,
That
it's incredible.
became this like blessing and awakening. Even his passing was a very spiritual awakening for me.
I could see that. I could see that. When, after his passing, when was it that so that I know you obviously started the
Functional
Functional
nutrition.
Nutrition Alliance. How quickly after his passing did you start that? I mean, I can't imagine being a grieving single mother and be like, I'm going to start this business for myself.
Yeah, no, it was not. I had a very established career in book publishing that allowed me to work from a distance. I had always worked from a distance. So that also, as a single mom, meant I could drive and pick my kid up from preschool and do all the things that allowed me to work from home. So it wasn't until I think so Gilbert, our son, who's visiting right now, he's 24 now, but
Wow.
he was 19 months old when his father died. And it wasn't, I think, until he was 4 that I realized, like, this is my this is my calling. I have to do this. There wasn't a lot of evidence of this profession. And I realized I had to put myself back through school. So I put myself back through 5.5 years of school
Wow,
with
Andrea.
more after that. But before I thought I could see clients now, it was 2009. Isamu was diagnosed in 2000. He died in 2002. 2009 is when I hung my shingle to start seeing clients. And then I was having a kind of success, with client outcomes that other people were not seeing around me, whether they were health coaches or naturopathic doctors. Nutritionist wasn't even in my realm, although I knew that was what I was doing. And
Yeah.
so that's when I started to mentor and teach. I thought it was just going to be a little mentorship group, not a school that's now trained almost 9,000
So within that
practitioners.
first year, like when did it happen? It just snowball like right away that you realized it wasn't something small?
So 2009, I started seeing clients. That happened pretty quickly. I started teaching little classes. I think that, and I want to share this with anybody who's like looking at a second or a third career, that bringing who I was from my publishing career into this new realm, not saying goodbye to it, is what was a differentiator for me. I'm a producer. I
Yeah,
can
I could see
bring
that.
everything together. I can write. So it was the me that carried through and recognizing that. So I started seeing clients and teaching classes locally, then teaching little classes online because that was the trend, all
Yeah,
audio.
yeah.
Then I thought in 2011, I think I thought I'll do a mentorship group. There was a little hiccup there. I was like, maybe I'm not ready. So 2012 was my first offering of full body systems, which is still the program that
Wow.
I offer today. It's, of course, evolved and changed, but yeah, a journey.
I love the advice you gave because I think so many women listening and in this space in particular are looking for their second chapters. You know, kids are going off to college, different things, and we're asking ourselves, like, now what? And I think it is this thing of you know, and I don't mean to make this about a masculine, feminine thing, but I think so often in the masculine world, it's like this hierarchy, like you're moving up a ladder. And for women, we sort of move around, we morph into different versions of ourselves and mother or a stay at home mom, healer, whatever it may be. And we often think like they don't go together. And so I
Yes.
love that you took your past with book publishing and you're like, the woman who got me to this far is going to continue to get me into this next phase. And you took some of that wisdom and that learning with you into this next chapter, which I think is really important. And it's not always linear. It can be this like circle and winding up and down. And I really appreciate you sharing that because I think it's just important to note that it probably wasn't an obvious decision to go from book publishing to like, you know what, I'm going to become a nutrition coach and coach people.
Yeah, no.
I think sometimes they're not as obvious. So thank you for sharing that.
Can I piggyback on that for one more
Please.
point? Because I know there's so many different directions we can go, but I'm thinking a lot lately about longevity and the different
Yeah.
phases. And you talk about the kids going off to college, and I think of that as a third act. And I think
Yeah.
what I'm entering is a fourth act, right? So
Interesting. Okay.
what happens is we have these young lives where it's before kids. Then we have our kids at home, and there's that phase of life where we're parenting actively and
Yeah.
we're still trying to be everything we are trying to be. And a lot of that
Yeah.
identity is wrapped in our work selves these days, you know, who we are and what our career focus is. The third act, I think, is when the kids do go off to college, if that's what they are doing, there's still a container for them. They are
Yeah.
not actively parenting as much, but we are still parenting. We are still guiding. And I think what took me by surprise is what I'm calling the fourth act, which is this phase of life where they are not in a contained environment anymore. They are out in the world, and we have to let them go on another level. And what happened for me in that shift was a certain part of my identity felt like it was being pulled out and
Yeah.
away
I could
from
see that.
me. And I want to bring this back to health, because when we're looking at health and wellness, which I'm always going to put in bunny ears because I do not like the word,
Thank you for doing that. I
that
agree.
wellness, part of that is our identity and our belonging and our purpose. And when we
Yes.
ignore those pieces and just seek the fixes for what we think is broken in our body, we're ignoring the medicine that exists within our body, which
Yeah.
is part of what keeps us healthy and ticking and our hormones working. And so for me, that fourth act was not only something that kind of pulled the rug out from under me and surprised me and made me have to go within and say, what is happening here? Like, whoa, my identity, he doesn't need me. And like, good pat, that's a pat on the back.
Yeah, of
But
course,
also
of
like
course.
felt overwhelming. But the other thing that it helped me to realize is, where do we find purpose? Where do we go back, like you're saying, in that cycle? It might even be back to being a young child and what inspired us and where we felt freedom and sovereignty, that we bring back into our lives to create the purpose that drives us forward. So I just wanted to reflect what you were saying and really underscore that health means so many different things.
Okay, this is a perfect segue to kind of get into narrative medicine here in a second, but I just want to acknowledge what you just said. And I think it's so beautiful. There's a quote, and I'm going to butcher this. I'll just paraphrase it, something around like, nutrition isn't just what we put in our bodies. It's not just the food we eat. It's also our purpose. And I
Yes.
talk this all the time with the women I work with. And I think there is this sense of, for many of us, we can lose it because we feel like our place in society isn't valued, or like, where do we belong? Where do we fit in? And because our culture doesn't value women after a certain
Exactly.
age, and so it's not in our heads, it's real.
Yes.
And I think you're exactly right. Like, there is that part of like, you can do all of that. You can eat all the protein you want, and you can get 10,000 steps, and you can do all those things and still not feel well inside. And I
Yes.
think it is like finding that deeper purpose and finding your place. Like, where do I belong? What am I waking up every day to do? And that's where, like, I really believe, and you do too, I know, like, where your vitality comes from, like where your energy comes from. It gives you a reason to get up and out of bed. And I wish we could change the conversation more to that instead
We're
of
doing it. We are doing
instead of,
it.
I don't know, supplements and collagen. Not that they're not
I
great.
know.
So speaking of, let's turn it to narrative medicine. I just really started hearing about it from you. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And this is what I wish I would have had a decade ago. And can you share with those listening, just give us an intro, like in your words, what does narrative medicine mean?
Yes. And I always love context. So I'm going to say I am a functional medicine nutritionist, right? And for
Yes.
me, the story of what happened, anchoring on story, is that I saw health and medicine get very fixated on the internal physiology, what's going on with me. It's my thyroid, it's my sex hormones. And then what do I do about it? So I call that the soup, what's going on in the body, and
Great.
this skill. But my matrix that I teach into includes the story, the soup, and the skill. And so there was a part of me that was looking at that matrix and going, we're so fixated. What's going on in my body? What's wrong with me? How do I fix this? What do I do about it? And we're not realizing how the story impacts that physiological terrain too. That
Hmm.
story impacts what the appropriate skill might be. We're ignoring it. So I went on this quest of like, where's the story coming back into this equation? Ultimately, that led me to narrative medicine, which I also had known about, but wasn't as familiar with. It's such a new field. It's only 20 something years old, and it is interpreted differently by whoever's teaching it. I completed my training at Columbia University. It's very academic, very pedagogical, meaning it's very much about how do practitioners think about, to put it in my own words, empathy. How do we activate deep listening to be with a client or a patient in their actual story so we can hear the nuance that might lead us to the next clinical realm of care? I would like to take that same approach to deep listening and activating the muscle of deep listening to ourselves. So,
So good. Like, that's the thing. Yes. Okay.
yes.
Keep talking.
Yeah.
Yes. Tell
So,
me more.
just how do we tap into deep listening in a way that almost surprises us, to find threads of our humanity that wake us up. So when I talk about our story or our narrative, I'm not talking necessarily about the one we tell ourselves or the one we walk around promoting in ourselves.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me, the practice is bringing people into a red thread within them that when you pull it makes you go, oh, whoa, me. I experience that. And it's through a practice that just invites us to step out of the everyday noise and pause so that we can, again, exercise that muscle of deep listening. And it's such a beautiful practice to me. There's nothing like it that I have found, and it intersects really, really beautifully with the functional medicine that I know, so that we can bring that more global understanding to ourselves, to empathy we have with ourselves and for ourselves, and the decisions we make, instead of just chasing and being in that sympathetic dominant fight or flight. What's the next thing?
Yeah. Yeah. You got me right away when you talk about deep listening. I'm a big believer and proponent of meditation. It really changed my life 10 years ago when my kids were all young and I was overwhelmed. And it's really my foundation to everything today. And I do have a lot of, I'll just say like teachers in my life or experts in my life, people I rely to. It's not like I don't have doctors or different things, but really it's been understanding, like coming back to myself, like what is the thing that I'm missing, whether that's movement, sunshine, rest,
Exactly.
a nourishing meal. It's usually simpler than I think I'm sometimes the outside world presents it. And I'm like, oh, you just need a hug and a nap,
Yes.
and sometimes it's as basic as that. I don't mean to simplify our well-being.
No, that those are necessary foundations.
Yeah. Can you talk for someone listening who maybe is like, that sounds nice, Katie and Andrea, I get it. And yet, like, they're going to go to their doctors. How can one maybe on their own, as we're trying to empower women to just, I'm hearing you in theory and I understand the concept. What does this look like? Is there a practical way people can apply this who maybe aren't seeing someone as, I'll just say, empathetic as you?
Yeah, so there's really simple ways that I think we can be practicing this regularly.
Okay.
And there are also, opportunities to step into places. I offer a free quarterly narrative medicine workshop. It's two
Oh,
hours, it's
great.
free. People are on my website. There's an opportunity. It's unusual. So people are going to show up and be like, what do I need to do? But I'm going to hold that space and you will be surprised and delighted coming out the other side. But what are little things we can do? Notice the moments in a day when we're moved.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a commercial, a song that brings a tear to the eye, listening to your kid play an instrument and having a feeling. That
Yeah.
is the pharmacy within. Allow that feeling to just sit with you. Like, take a moment when that comes up and be with it. Allow it to permeate through your cells. There's things like that. If you are out with girlfriends or partaking in a conversation with family where you are just like, this is so darn yummy, savor that. If
Okay.
something's uncomfortable, allow yourself to sit in what's happening with me, what's happening within me, not try to label it or make sense of it. I mean, this is what led me to that thinking about the fourth act. It was a year
Yeah.
ago. I was visiting my son in New York and I felt him kind of pushing me away. And that was for
Mm.
his own growth. He was struggling with job search after college, and I want to help because that's what I've always done. And he wants to figure it out. And I
Yeah.
could not make sense of this in my body. It felt like
Yeah.
rejection, it felt like failure. And I had to move my way through it, not ignore it, not bypass what was happening, but recognize the nervous system upset. And
Yep.
I'll tell you, he then went to Asia, came back. I was there in New York when he came back. He's moving to Asia again. But there was a moment where he told me, I'm going to want to go back to Tokyo. And everything in my body said, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. But I said, that's so far away. And immediately
Yeah.
he said, you're going to love it. And my entire nervous system went, oh, he's not pushing me away. He's taking flight, and I'm included. And
Yeah.
I couldn't have gotten to that regulated place if I didn't allow myself to feel what was in the go through. This is what we go through as parents who aren't needed in the same way,
Yeah.
as women who aren't needed in the workforce in the same way, as lovers whose bodies look different.
Yes. Yes.
Allowing ourselves to be in those sensations is narrative medicine. It's,
Yeah.
what is this? I don't know. Where do I feel something like it? What are the stories, the poetry, the art that bring me alive or have me feel a sensation? What movies make me cry? Why? When we interact with the humanities and feel our humanity, that is narrative medicine to me. And it is medicine.
So much of you were saying, like sharing that example, I could, my heart, I mean, I could picture myself being in that room, feeling the same things. I know everyone listening is like, I get that. And such a relatable example. I think one of the things that was really beautiful, what you're saying, I often hear, when I work with women about slowing down. And I love how your question, mine's about meditation, but your question is like, what moves you? Similar thing, right? We're
Yes.
asking to tap into something bigger than
Yes.
ourselves. We're actually getting out of our thinking brain and getting into our feeling body.
Yes.
And I think the thing is I think it can often be dismissed. It'd be like, I don't have time for that, or that must be nice for you, but I still have to solve this. So I just want people listening, because I'm sure there are people listening right now and having a little bit of a reaction, of a little bit of a pushback, a little like, that must be nice. So I just want to make sure they're hearing this, that not only is this something for mentally for us to slow down, but physiologically, this is
Yes.
affecting us. And I think
Absolutely.
that's the thing that people are missing, is like, not only we're not talking about this just being good for your heart and your mind. This is actually physically good for your body. There are physiological changes that happen.
1,000%. Let me just give you an example. Yeah, this is where I think my work is evolving. Like, how is this functional medicine and narrative medicine combined? So if we just look at belonging as an example, the genetic response in the body, the epigenetic response that turns on in the body when we feel like we belong, is more potent of an anti-inflammatory than taking fish oil.
I knew that. I was like, right in our gut, we just know that. And so thank you for giving us concrete medicine that's like, yes, this is real.
This is real. And it
Yeah.
sometimes means we have to move through it to find the medicine. That journey that I went through with my son, and I'm still going through, as he'll move so far away, is what led me to think about longevity. Like, what does it mean for women who are of a certain age to no longer be relevant in all the ways that we have defined ourselves and our relevancy? How can we still be relevant? And it's not about chasing what was in our lives. It's about chasing what's next, or not chasing.
Yeah.
It's about
Yeah.
inviting what's next in our lives. It's something new for, at least, I think I'm older than you are, but like, it's new for a generation of women who have defined ourselves by multiple things that are all shifting at once. The generation prior to me paved the way, but we are at a precipice where things are shifting in so many aspects of our lives. And I think we can seize it as an opportunity if we slow down and tune in and take that time It is time and it is a
I
privilege,
agree.
but it costs less than all the supplements you're going to take or all the treatments you're going to get. And it could very well be more beneficial.
Can we stay on this aging topic for a minute? I really like this. And I really like how you're sort of reframing longevity because I think sometimes or what I hear, what I like see online or in the wellness culture is this idea of like postponing longevity. It's
Yes.
like not really aging. It's like denying aging almost. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I'm hearing you saying this idea of instead like embracing it, leaning in towards it and accepting maybe and welcoming a new version of yourself. When you think about this idea of reframing longevity for women, what is it? Can you kind of give us like
A nugget.
yeah, like what is
So
it for you? What does that
I
mean for
will tell
you?
you that I am in the process of leading a book club. It's called The Long View, and we are
Okay, that's a great
divided in
name.
two groups. And it's a book club where the different groups are reading different books that I've assigned. I'm, of course, reading every book. So we meet every 2 weeks, and it's a discussion about the book, the perspective, and a narrative medicine exercise where we might think about if you do this, what's the risk? What's the reward?
Yeah.
Where are things in your life that you were not thinking it would be a good thing and it ended up being a benefit, right? Like, where are there places where we could pull that red thread? So what's really interesting to me, and we're just in the first couple of months and it's a 10-month program. What's really interesting to me is to create our own map of what longevity actually means. And we, of course, want health span, not just lifespan. The thing
Yep.
we fear the most are the sicknesses that go with aging, not the aging necessarily itself,
Yep.
because we know
Interesting.
one is inevitable, but is the other one something we can influence?
Yeah.
And really seeing what is the roadmap, what is the blueprint. So I feel like every time I'm reading more, there's more that I'm adding to the blueprint so that I can
Mhm.
come down. I love threes. So what are the first principles? What are the things? Purpose is for sure one of those things. I can tell you unequivocally, every single author in some way is talking about purpose. And that is
Okay.
something only we can define. And I just want to reframe purpose for a moment. When I had people write into a prompt about the last time that they felt like deep meaning, what came up was not, I'm changing the world and global warming is over. It was, I helped my daughter move out of her apartment after she broke up with her
I don't know.
boyfriend.
I'm getting like emotional thinking about this.
Right?
Yes.
Like,
Hmm.
purpose is something that is there and within all of us. And I feel you. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this grandiose thing where we're like, I don't know my purpose. Yes, you do. You felt it.
Yeah.
You felt it. You felt it in the last week. I know we all did. And it really is tuning back into what makes me feel meaning, not where do I get accolades for being a big deal.
Yeah, I always think about it as like what makes you feel connection to something bigger. Like it
Yes.
makes, where you're like, wow, I am just a part of this and you can see the whole and you're like, I'm an important part. I'm a necessary in this moment.
Yes.
I think women, for the better or the worse, we get so much of that in our nurturing roles. And I agree with you. Okay, so if we're talking about the threes, if maybe first is purpose.
I don't know where this is taking me.
Oh, because I was like, what's number 2 and 3, Andrea? Give it to me.
I'm not sure yet. I'm hoping by the
Okay.
end of this year, I'm going to be like, I
Yeah.
spent the year I turned 59 with a deep
Yeah.
dive into longevity, and here's what I found. But, it really does come back to the core principles of what I teach in functional nutrition. Going back to something you said, Katie, I call it like the 3 tiers of nutrition
Yeah. Let's
mastery.
talk about that. Okay.
Tier 1 are the non-negotiables. Tier 2 is deficiency to sufficiency. Tier 3 is dismantling dysfunction. We always want to go to tier 3. Medicine goes to tier 3. let's say that there's another route to get to tier 3 besides target practice. That's tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1, non-negotiables. We all have our own non-negotiables. We know what they are. Like if I said to you, what's a non-negotiable for you every day?
Mm, meditation, and then walking and getting sunshine, feeling the sun on my skin.
Beautiful. You know that that is a non-negotiable for you. As a clinician, I'm going to say the non-negotiables I need to see for you are sleep, poop, and blood sugar balance.
Okay.
So non-negotiable, that's my non-negotiable trifecta. And you've got the non-negotiables that I'm going to bake into my non-negotiables for you. But as a clinician, no hormones without talking about sleep, poop, blood sugar balance. Don't even want to talk about your sex hormones in your menopause until I've got that foundation, right?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we can say, oh, that's too easy, but I can tell you physiologically why those matter before you start taking your bioidenticals. Like if
Yep.
you're not pooping and you're not sleeping, you're not going to get the most benefit and you might even get some harm. So sleep, poop, blood sugar balance. The tier 2, deficiency to sufficiency, you said it earlier. I might look at deficiencies through the lens of, yes, do you have enough hydrochloric acid to break down the proteins you're eating? Do you have enough vitamin D in your system to support your immune
Yeah.
health, which is a key? But for me, the non-negotiables are also the sunshine, the love, the peace, the rest, the belonging. And so when we broaden our perspective, we actually nourish the soil that allows for the expression, the branches, the leaves we want to see in our health.
Mm.
So what I'm learning in the longevity deep dive takes me right back to those principles that I teach.
I could see that. I could see that. And I love that. Like, right. If we're thinking about the flowers and the blooms we want to see on the tree, it starts with that soil. And that soil is that purpose, that sense of belonging. It's getting out in sunshine, getting hugs from our children or our loved ones, right? Like we think about the soil and so many things, in the world right now, like we want to fix and change. And we're like, actually, the soil could be really beautiful. We could just nurture ourselves and take care of ourselves. I love how simple, even though I know it's not, mainly because there's so much noise we have to really tune out. And we're just
Totally.
really going back to this idea, then it really is so much of this we know intuitively. Am
Yes.
I correct in thinking that? Is that where your head's at too? Like there's a lot out there being commodified and sold to us, but really if we're thinking about nutrition or wellness or well-being it is just intuitive within us and tuning out all that noise.
Yeah, and I think it's the noise, but I think there's also a clearing and a calming that you speak so beautifully to that allows us to touch true intuition. I
Yeah.
think intuition has even been kind of like intuitive eating and intuitive fasting and
I get
intuitive
it.
like I mean
I
it's
see
I'm
it. I
not
see it. Yeah, I see it. I
none,
agree with you.
none of it's bad. It's just like we're so far from being able to tap that. And I think it's just like I'm just really savoring the moments that become messengers for us and where that can take us to getting back to the intuition, getting back to ourselves. And I want to say that, the wellness industry and a lot of the noise is very masculine and
I
it's
agree.
so commodified. And our resistance is in the rest and the deep listening.
Oh, that's so good, Andrew. Like right there. I'm like, there she said it. That's it. We could just take that. But as we're wrapping this up, one last question for you. I just want to know, like, what are you excited about? Like, what is it as you think about, and in particular, I mean, for women as we're aging and what you see happening, like, what are you excited about when you look at the future for us?
Oh my gosh. I really feel like this is an area that I am very excited about. I'm very excited about diving into more. I think there is a new beginning for women, especially a generation of women that's hitting a new place. So I think it is this return to self, return to original meaning, sovereignty. I think there's clues to our longevity in what our earlier selves and intuition can tell us. And it's how we take the time to listen and recognize when we're getting
Mm.
seduced by the noise that I think is the way forward.
I agree. I just want to thank you so much. I don't know. I was getting emotional listening to you speak. There are very few women that I would look at and be like, I would turn to you for advice. And as I'm looking at you moving forward with your life and the way you've moved with such grace and really used your own knowing to forge not just a life for yourself, but help so many other women find their
Mm,
own knowing is really inspiring for me, as I'm sort of new on my own journey of helping to become my own leader and help women in the way that I can. I look to what you've built and I think like, may I be as inspiring and as grounded in self that you are.
thank you.
I really appreciate so much of the wisdom that you shared. I want to have you back on because I'm like,
Let's
we
do
didn't even
it.
get into a lot of the nutrition stuff,
I
but I was like,
know.
I want to talk more about the meat here. And so that was really good. So just thank you for being so generous of your spirit. And I will link in the show notes for everyone where you can learn more about Andrea and join some of her groups and hopefully find out her other 2 tiers of longevity.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Andrea, thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope it spoke to you and you enjoyed it. If you would take a minute to subscribe to the show, and it would help you because you would never miss an episode, and it would help me because you would never miss an episode. And if you would take a minute to just click one of those stars to rate and review this episode, it would do wonders for the show and mean the world to me. Thanks so much for being here and just all your continued support. I can't wait to talk to you again next week.